Hey everybody, welcome back to Game Esoterica and returning series Ridge Evolution. It's a hard word to say, but it's a look-back retrospective at the entire Ridge Racer franchise by Namco. And if you can't tell already, today we're playing Ridge Racer 3D, originally released on the 3DS, one of the earliest games on that handheld. It's one of the games I got when I purchased my 3DS. I fell in love with it back then, and I still think it's one of the best games in the Ridge Racer franchise so far. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But we've gone through an absolute metric crap ton of Ridge Racer releases in this retrospective, but Ridge Racer 3D has always felt very special to me for two reasons. One, it recreates some of my favorite tracks from the franchise and makes some of the most poppy colors on screen of any release that you've seen so far. Secondarily, it was one of the first games I had on my 3DS, and when I first saw the glasses-free 3D, my mind was blown. It's one of those things, you had to be there. Nobody had really seen anything like that before, and getting a Ridge Racer game at a launch on a console is not weird whatsoever. They were so famous for hitting launch windows, but on the 3DS it just felt extra special. And if you haven't noticed already, there's a tiny red line in the middle of the screen. We're going to call him Bob and pretend he doesn't exist, because I am emulating this, because getting capture out of a real 3DS is not something I am equipped for. But outside of that, emulating this game and getting it to look modern with an internal resolution bump just works so well. Now this is everything I've loved about Ridge Racer, and it's one of the most arcadey feeling of the releases. The drifting is perfect, all of the physics are there, the music is great. This just feels like an extension of the arcade original. It does one thing and one thing only. It gives you a bunch of courses to run around and drift on, and it does that so well. And of course, if you can't see down below, it also features the turbo mechanic. This might be my favorite instance of actually using turbo in the Ridge Racer games that support it. This just kind of feels like an old school throwback to where it came from in the arcades, because I've mentioned earlier, even though Ridge Racer is known as being an arcade franchise, it only got a few releases to arcades proper before it basically became a home console and handheld property. And I would say that while the PSP games are a ton of fun, Ridge Racer 3D on the Nintendo 3DS just feels like it has the closest connection to the arcade lineage. Every once in a while I do have a little control issue here. If you do make a mistake and bump into the wall at the wrong spot, the game is going to punish you for it. But that's the great thing about a game like this. It is that risk versus reward that the entire franchise gives you the entire way through, and it works so well here via emulation on an Xbox One X control pad, much more so than the control system on the 3DS, which always felt a little bit imprecise. But even though this is a better experience because of the emulation enhancements and a better controller, when this game came out, I was just absolutely in love with it. It was so fun to get another Ridge Racer game, and it was so fun that it felt so arcadey, because as the series goes on, it's got more campaign modes, more challenges, and while all of the courses do have that arcade setup, it always felt like that was secondary to the actual main campaign. Here in Ridge Racer 3D, all of these courses from all of the different Ridge Racer games spanning decades are here, and they are absolutely great. And that's the best part about this. It does just feel like an arcade release, and that's probably down to the handheld status. You want to get in and get out, get some gameplay going, and then move on about your day, versus sitting down to a home console release where maybe you're going to spend a couple hours with it. This is a very concise, compact version of Ridge Racer, but it just does everything right, and that's what I love about it. It's a lean release. It's not the most fully featured of any Ridge Racer game you're ever going to play, but what is on offer here is exactly what you want out of an arcade racing game. Great courses. I've looked back into the history of Ridge Racer by recreating courses that we had in original games but on the Nintendo 3DS, and absolutely outstanding controls. You give me those three things and I'm a very happy arcade racing game fan, and that's why this is one of my favorite videos to do in the entire retrospective. It's just one of those things. I've got such great and fond memories of this game, playing it on the train, going to college, trying to check out some courses, getting a game or two in between classes or work. It's one of those things that was so much fun back then, and I have such fond memories of playing it in that circumstance. That's something with games. Sometimes a game just hits you at the right time in life. It provides you the escape you need from whatever else you're doing, and Ridge Racer 3D is just that game for me. But of course it is a Ridge Racer title, so you know the soundtrack is going to be incredible as well, and for the 3DS it's got some incredible music going on, so go ahead and listen and I'll be right back. Just more classic Ridge Racer music, and this franchise has great music the entire way through, but some of my favorite tracks are here on the 3DS. And that's the fun thing about this entire franchise. Even when they're using the same tracks you've seen before, even when they're retreading old territory, somehow every single game manages to make it feel fresh and new, and the 3DS version of Ridge Racer does the best job of that. Even when I'm playing a course that I played 5-6 times before, and trust me, I played these back to back for the captures for the anthology, this one gave me the most sense of excitement outside of playing the tracks where they originally released, whether it be arcade or home console. There's just something about the visuals of this game as well. Obviously the 3DS was not the most powerful piece of hardware. It could handle 3D, but it definitely had to make some stylistic choices to make sure the game ran at a good frame rate and looked good at the same time, and I actually think that's to the game's strengths. There's a ton of primary colors, everything pops, the geometry is simple but effective at conveying what it needs to on screen. Sometimes those limitations in hardware actually go to building a better game, because something like Ridge Racer 7 is a very pretty game and stylistically is good. It doesn't give me the same sense of joy and satisfaction of just looking at these primary colors we get out of the 3DS, and that's the thing. I still love the original arcade releases because they are so vibrant and interesting to look at, and the 3DS version here gets me as close to that visual as I remember, but of course with a lot more modern accoutrements to take a look at. And you'll see here as we go through another course from a previous game, this is just so good. All of the turns, all of the drifts, everything is set up in a way in which you learn the course and suddenly you start to feel invincible. You will see that you get a little bit of a 3D effect even when you're not in 3D mode when you do use the nitro, and that would just kind of exaggerate what's on screen and that 3D effect. And if you never played a 3DS before or Ridge Racer 3D, definitely check one out. I have a lot of 3DS games, but maybe it's just a handheld you missed out on. The 3D effect hasn't aged as well and it's not as mind-blowing as when it first came out of the box, but it's still a fun library with a ton of fun games, and Ridge Racer 3D is definitely one of those for me. Although you will see sometimes if you drift too hard you can get that camera out of line, and that's basically telling you made a drastic mistake and you're now going to have to take the next corner completely blind. But there's some excitement in there as well. I just love trying to get around the cars, bumping and grinding my way into a first place finish and really fighting for those positions, because as you get further into the game the AI is going to get more challenging and they're going to fight you every inch of the way. They're going to try to block your path, they're going to try to get in your way, and they're going to try to slipstream you to get around you. Because you haven't noticed yet as well, there is a slipstream icon at the bottom left hand corner of the screen. The better you drive behind the vehicle, the more of a boost you can get around them, and that is going to be crucial. The two places you're going to pass without nitro are going to be when you're slipstreaming and going to be when you're drifting into corners. But just seeing the car completely break out from underneath itself and the absolute chaos here in Ridge Racer 3D, this is just one of the most action-packed entries in the entire franchise, and I love that. But if you haven't noticed yet already, this course is something we've seen in many games before. What I'm going to do is just give you this look at the Ridge Racer 3D version, and we're going to pop over to the PlayStation original as well, just to give you a sense of where all of these different things come from, because it is really interesting just how often Namco reuses the same courses, and how they somehow manage to make them feel fresh and new every single time they come to them. That's something that I feel like no other developer ever 100% figured out. Retreading old territory is somehow fun in a Ridge Racer game when Namco does it, but any other developer doing the same thing would definitely get a couple strikes against them for reusing the same thing over and over again. Maybe just because I love Ridge Racer that much that I forgive them for it, but it's one of those things. They managed to take something from the PlayStation 1 and then remake it on the Nintendo 3DS, and somehow it feels both intimately familiar as well as completely foreign at the same time, and that is why I find this game so fun. It is just the pure Ridge Racer experience distilled down to a handheld game. And again, while the PlayStation Portable versions were a ton of fun and definitely prettier than the 3DS versions for the most part, they just never had the same sense of arcade satisfaction that Ridge Racer 3 gives me here. They are 9.5 out of 10s, where this one I feel like is a 10 out of 10. When I play Ridge Racer 3D, I get the same vibes as when I play Scud Racer Daytona 2, which is to say I'm having a blast from the start flag all the way to the checkered flag. Now I don't know if this is as good as Sega's best efforts, leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think, but it's one of Namco's best efforts and I commend them for that. This is just one of those games that I will play every single year for probably 15-20 minutes for the rest of my life, or until my hands get too arthritic to actually hold a controller, because I'm sure it'll happen to be at some point in time doing all these videos. But honestly, this is just one of those games. For the time and place I played it, it was so much fun, and every single time I come back to it, it gives me that same sense of satisfaction. It doesn't do anything it doesn't need, but what it does perfectly. Insane arcade drifting racing action that feels as close to the arcade originals as we've ever gotten since the series left the arcades. And that is still the funny thing. Everyone thinks Ridge Racer is an arcade franchise, but outside of 3 arcade releases, the bulk majority of this retrospective has been home console releases and handheld releases. Maybe one day Namco will give us another arcade release proper, but at the minimum we could at least get a Ridge Racer 8. But that is Ridge Racer 3D. It's a 10 out of 10 in my book, whether you play it on a 3DS in 3D mode, or if you emulate it like I'm doing here. Sure that I'll have more videos in this retrospect. I'll have videos throughout the week, but we are done. Go do some racing, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.